At dinner, I said. Just let me know when the family trip is. My son replied, You're not part of the trip, and definitely not part of the family. You can forget about it. Everyone at the table burst out laughing. I just left. That was 4 days ago. 4 days that feel like 4 years. 4 days in which everything changed, though nobody noticed except me. Now I'm here, sitting across from Elizabeth Vance, in her office that smells like coffee and old paper, while she reviews a document that I myself handed her 2 days ago. Elizabeth is 58 years old, but it seems like time respects her. She wears glasses that hang from a gold chain and has that look that doesn't judge but also doesn't tolerate any nonsense. She's been a lawyer since before I got married. I met her at a wedding decades ago, when we were both different people. I never thought I'd one day be sitting in front of her for something like this. The manila envelope is on the desk. It's large, thick, sealed. It has my son's name written on it in block letters, Mark Harrison. Elizabeth touches it with her fingertips, as if she knows exactly what it means. And she does. She knows because she prepared it herself. Are you sure, Caroline? She asks me for the 3rd time in the last hour. It's not that she doubts me. She just wants to make sure I don't doubt myself. Elizabeth knows these types of cases well. She knows many women get this far and then turn back. She knows a mother's love can be the heaviest chain there is. But I'm not turning back. I'm sure, I tell her. My voice sounds firm, firmer than I've heard it in years, maybe in decades. Elizabeth nods slowly, picks up a pen, and hands it to me. It's a silver pen, elegant, the kind that feels heavy in your hand. I take it and feel the cold metal against my fingers. There are 3 copies of the document in front of me. They all say the same thing. They all have the same title at the top: Lawsuit for Breach of Financial Obligation and Misappropriation. It sounds cold, legal, distant, but it's exactly what I need. Exactly what I deserve. I sign the first copy, then the second, then the third. My name appears 3 times in blue ink. Caroline Harrison. 60 years old. Widow. Mother. Or at least that's what I thought I was. Elizabeth carefully gathers the documents, places them inside the manila envelope, and closes the metal clasp with a dry click. That sound echoes in the office like a sentence, like a door closing, or maybe like a door finally opening. It gets served first thing tomorrow morning, Elizabeth says, writing something in her planner. The process is already in motion. There's no turning back, Caroline. Do you understand? Yes, I understand. I understand perfectly. There's no turning back. And that doesn't scare me. What scares me is that I should have done this years ago. I leave the office with a strange feeling in my chest. It's not relief, not yet. It's not sadness either. It's something in between, something nameless, but it weighs less than before. I walk slowly down the street, my purse hanging from my shoulder, wearing sunglasses even though the day is overcast. I don't want anyone to see my eyes. Not because I'm crying, but because I don't want to explain why I'm not crying. I stop in front of a flower shop. There are sunflowers by the entrance, big, yellow, alive. I look at them for a moment and think about buying one, but I don't. I no longer need to fill my house with pretty things to feel accompanied. I don't need any of that anymore. I keep walking. I get home as the sun is setting. It's a small 2-story house with a yard out front and a wooden door that my husband painted red 20 years ago. He died 12 years ago. 12 years in which this house has been my refuge, my prison, my memory. 12 years in which I've lived alone, but never in peace. I go inside and close the door behind me. The silence greets me as always. I leave my purse on the entryway table, take off my shoes, and walk barefoot to the living room. I sit on the sofa, the same sofa where my son sat the last time he came to ask me for money. That was 3 months ago. He didn't come to visit me. He came to ask me for $15,000. And I gave it to him, like always. I close my eyes and take a deep breath. The air comes in heavy, as if it's full of dust. Maybe it is. I haven't cleaned in days. I haven't done anything in days but think. Think about everything. About how I got here. About how I let it all get to this point. I think about Mark, my son, The baby I held in my arms, fed, and cared for when he had a fever. The rebellious teenager who would yell at me but always came back for a hug in the end. The man who started a family and who, according to him, doesn't need me anymore. Except when he needs money. I think about the dinner 4 days ago. I think about his words. You're not part of the trip, and definitely not part of the family. I can still hear them. I can still feel the weight of every syllable. It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it, with such calm, with such coldness, as if he were talking about the weather, as if I weren't his mother, as if I were nothing, and they all laughed. Megan, his wife, was the first. A short, sharp laugh, full of satisfaction. Then Mason, my 8-year-old grandson, who didn't even understand why he was laughing but just imitates everything his parents do. And finally Mark. He laughed last, but he enjoyed it the most. I didn't say anything. I stood up, took my sweater from the back of the chair, and left. There were no shouts, no tears, no drama, just silence, my silence, and that silence was louder than anything I could have said. I open my eyes and look at my living room ceiling. There's a water stain in the corner that's been there for months. I should call someone to fix it. But I don't. I don't feel like it. I don't feel like doing anything other than this. Being here, still, feeling how everything is finally starting to make sense. The manila envelope is sealed. The lawsuit is signed. Tomorrow, Mark will be served. And then I'll know if I'm really his mother, or if I've just been his bank all these years. 4 days before signing those documents, I was as nervous as a girl before her first communion. I had done my hair, put on the beige dress Mark gave me for my birthday last year, and I was holding a box wrapped in silver paper. Inside was a set of embroidered towels I saw at the department store that I thought Megan would like. I've always tried to get her to like me. I've always failed. Mark's house is in a new subdivision, one of those places where all the houses look the same but cost a fortune. An electric gate, a perfectly cut lawn, 2 cars in the driveway. I paid for one of those cars. Well, technically it was a loan. $30,000 he never paid back. But that didn't matter that night. That night, I just wanted to be with my family. I rang the doorbell and waited. I heard footsteps inside, laughter, quiet music. Then the door opened, and there was Mason, my grandson, with his tablet in his hand and headphones hanging around his neck. "Hey, Grandma," he said without really looking at me. His eyes were still on the screen. "Hi, sweetie. How are you?" "Fine." And he turned around, leaving the door open for me to come in by myself. I closed the door behind me and walked toward the living room. The house smelled like freshly cooked food, something with garlic and tomato. Mark was on the sofa, also on his phone. He looked up for a second when he saw me. "Hey, Mom." "Hi, son. I brought something for Megan." I held up the box as if it were a trophy. He nodded without much interest and went back to his screen. "She's in the kitchen." I walked in that direction, clutching the box to my chest. Megan had her back to me, stirring something in a large pot. She had her hair up in a high ponytail and was wearing a gray apron that said, "Queen of the Kitchen," in gold letters. "Hi, Megan." She barely turned without smiling. "Oh, Caroline, you're here." She didn't say good to see you or thanks for coming, just you're here, as if I were an unwelcome but inevitable surprise. "Yes, I brought this for you." I held out the box. She took it without really looking at it, set it on the kitchen island, and kept stirring her pot. "How nice," she said, in a tone that clearly meant the opposite. I stood there, not knowing what to do with my hands. Finally, I asked, "Can I help with anything?" "No, it's all ready." "Oh, okay. I'll just sit down then." I went back to the living room and sat in one of the dining room chairs. The table was already set. 4 plates, 4 glasses, 4 folded napkins. Everything perfect. Everything symmetrical. Everything without me in mind. Even though they clearly knew I was coming. Mark was still on the sofa. Mason was still on his tablet. Megan was still in the kitchen. And I was still waiting for someone to talk to me. 10 minutes passed. Finally, Megan came out with a steaming platter and placed it in the center of the table. Pasta with shrimp. It looked delicious. "Dinner's ready," she announced. Everyone got up and sat down. Mark at the head of the table, Megan to his right, Mason across from her, and me on the corner like a last-minute guest. We started eating in silence. The kind of silence where you only hear the clinking of silverware against plates. I tried to break it. "This is delicious, Megan." "Really good, thanks," she replied, without looking up. Silence again. I took a sip of water and searched for something else to say, something to generate conversation, something to make me feel part of what was happening there. "Mason, how was school this week?" The boy shrugged his shoulders. "Fine. Learn anything new?" "I don't know." Mark chimed in without looking at me. "Let him eat, Mom." "Oh, right, sorry." More silence, more silverware, more distance. Then I heard Megan say something quietly to Mark. Something about reservations and the beach hotel. My ears perked up. I leaned forward a little, trying to hear better. "A trip?" I asked with a smile. "Are you going somewhere?" Megan stopped talking. Mark chewed slowly, in no hurry. He finally swallowed and looked at me with that expression I know so well. The expression of now, I have to explain something obvious to you. "Yeah, we're going to the beach next month. 2 weeks." "How wonderful," I said, genuinely excited. "Where are you going?" "Cancun. An all-inclusive resort. That sounds beautiful." I set my fork down on the plate and clasped my hands. "Just let me know when the trip is exactly so I can plan. I can help with whatever you need, or if you want me to house sit while you're gone, I'd be happy to." There was a second of silence, then 2, then 3. Mark wiped his mouth with his napkin and set it on the table. He looked me straight in the eye with a coldness I had never seen before. "Mom, I don't think you understood." "What?" "You're not part of the trip." I felt a weird feeling in my stomach, like a pit, like when you're lost in an unfamiliar place. "What do you mean?" "You're not part of the trip," he repeated slowly, as if I were deaf or stupid, "and definitely not part of the family. You can forget about it." The world stopped. It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. With such calm, with such certainty, as if he were stating something so obvious it didn't even need explaining. And then the worst part happened. Megan laughed. It was a short, sharp laugh, full of satisfaction, as if someone had finally said out loud what she had always been thinking. Then Mason followed, not because he understood, but because he saw his mom laugh and he wanted to be part of whatever was happening. And finally, Mark. He was the last one to laugh. But he did it. He did it while looking right at me, enjoying it. I didn't move. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked at the 3 of them. My son, my daughter-in-law, my grandson. I watched them laugh at me as if I were a joke. As if I were a joke. Then I did the only thing I could do. I stood up. I took my sweater from the back of the chair, folded it over my arm, and walked to the door. Nobody stopped me. Nobody said, "Wait, Mom, it was a joke." Nobody said anything. I left that house, closed the door behind me, and walked to my car. My hands were shaking when I took out the keys. They were shaking when I opened the door. They were shaking when I started the engine. But I didn't cry. I didn't cry the whole way home. I didn't cry when I parked the car in front of my house. I didn't cry when I went inside and locked the door. I didn't cry when I sat on the sofa with the lights off. I didn't cry because something inside me understood that night wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of something completely different. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed sitting on the sofa until the sun started to creep through the curtains. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't check my phone. I just stayed there, watching the shadows move across the walls as my head replayed the same words over and over. "You're not part of the trip, and definitely not part of the family." It wasn't the first time Mark had treated me coldly. It wasn't the first time Megan had ignored me, or Mason had acted like I was invisible. But this time was different. This time he said it out loud. He said it with witnesses. He said it like a final judgment. And they all laughed. When dawn broke, I was still in the same spot. My legs were numb. My back ached. But my mind was more awake than ever. I got up slowly, walked to the kitchen, and put water on to heat. I made coffee without thinking. 3 scoops, boiling water. Stir slowly. The same motions as always. But nothing felt the same. I sat at the table with the steaming mug between my hands and looked out the window. The neighbors were already awake. Mr. Henderson was watering his plants. Mrs. Gable was taking out the trash. Everything kept moving as if nothing had happened. But for me, something had changed. Something had broken. And it wasn't my heart. It was something deeper. It was the image I had of myself. For years, I defined myself by being a mother. After my husband died, Mark became my world. My reason for getting up. My purpose. Everything I did was with him in mind. His future. His well-being. His happiness. When he finished college, I bought him his first car. $8,000 that I took from my savings. "It's a gift, Mom," he told me. "You don't have to worry, I'll pay you back." He never did. When he wanted to start his business, I took out a second mortgage on this house to lend him $80,000. "It's a loan, Mom," he told me. "In 2 years, I'll pay you back with interest." It's been 5 years. I haven't seen a single cent. When he got married, I paid for half the wedding. "We'll be grateful for this for the rest of our lives, Mom," he told me. They didn't invite me to choose the flowers. They didn't ask my opinion on the menu. But they did ask me for the money. When Mason was born, I was there. The first few months. I went every day. I changed diapers. I cooked food. I cleaned the house while Megan rested. "I don't know what we'd do without you, Mom," Mark would tell me. Then they stopped needing me. Or rather, they stopped pretending they needed me. And I kept giving. I kept calling. I kept visiting. I kept bringing gifts. I kept being useful so they wouldn't forget me. Because deep down, I was always afraid of this. That one day, they would tell me exactly what they told me last night. That I'm not part of the family. I took a sip of coffee. It was bitter. I hadn't put sugar in it. Nothing has tasted right to me lately. I got up and walked to the study. It's a small room at the back of the house where I keep papers, photos, memories. I opened the closet and pulled out an old cardboard box. It was full of documents. Receipts, bank transfers, signed contracts, written promises. I sat on the floor with the box between my legs and started to go through them one by one. "Here's the receipt for the car. $8,000. I'll pay you in 6 months, said the note Mark wrote me by hand. He never paid. Here's the loan agreement for the business. $80,000. With my signature and his, payment term, 24 months. It's been 60 months. Here are the bank transfers. One for $3,000 for an emergency. Another for $5,000 to fix their roof. Another for $2,000 for Mason's private school tuition. Another for $7,000 for the second car. I kept pulling out papers. I kept adding up amounts. I kept finding promises that were never kept. When I finished, I just stared at all that paper spread out on the floor. Years of my life turned into numbers. Years of sacrifice turned into debt. Debt that no one intended to pay. I picked up my phone and opened the calculator. I started adding. 8,000 plus 80,000 plus 3,000 plus 5,000 plus 2,000 plus 7,000 plus 15,000 that I lent him 3 months ago, plus 10,000 I gave him for the down payment on the house, plus 20,000 I lent him when the business almost failed the first year, plus 12,000 in Christmas gifts, birthdays, medical emergencies, plus 30,000 he never paid back from the joint investments we made when his father was still alive, plus 14,000 for the SUV Megan drives now, plus 11,000 for the trip to Europe they took 2 years ago. Total, $223,000. $223,000 I had given my son over 12 years. $223,000 that were supposed to be loans. That were supposed to be paid back. That were supposed to mean something more than just money. I stared at that number on the screen. 223,000. Almost $250,000. The value of this house. The value of my retirement. The value of my peace of mind. And he told me I'm not part of the family. I turned off the phone and let it drop onto the papers. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was in shock, in that strange state where everything seems unreal but at the same time, crystal clear. I got up from the floor and put all the documents back in the box. I closed it carefully and put it on the desk. Then I left the study and went back to the kitchen. The coffee was cold. I poured it down the sink and washed the mug. My hands moved on their own. Soap, water, dry, put away, all on autopilot. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 9:00 in the morning. A normal day, a regular Friday. But I was not the same person I had been on Thursday night. I picked up my phone and looked at it. No calls from Mark. No messages. No, I'm sorry, Mom. I went too far. Nothing. And that's when I truly understood. For him, nothing important happened last night. Last night was just another dinner. Another time he put me in my place. Another time he reminded me that he doesn't need me anymore. That he never really needed me. He just needed my money. But for me, last night changed everything. Because for the first time in 12 years, since my husband died, I saw myself clearly. I saw what I had become. I saw how I had allowed myself to be treated. I saw how I had confused being needed with being loved. And I saw that I had 223,000 reasons to stop allowing it. I left the phone on the table and went to take a shower. The hot water hit my shoulders like a forgiveness I was giving to myself. I cried in there. I finally cried. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of clarity, of liberation, of contained rage that was beginning to turn into something more useful. When I got out, I dressed slowly. Dark pants, a white blouse, comfortable shoes. I combed my hair and looked at myself in the mirror. 60 years old, widow, mother, or maybe not. Maybe I was just Caroline. And maybe that was enough. The next 3 days passed in a silence I had never experienced before. It wasn't the sad silence of when my husband died, nor was it the empty silence of lonely Sundays. It was a different kind of silence. A silence that had weight, that had purpose. I didn't call Mark. I didn't text him. I didn't drive by his house. I didn't ask how Mason was. I didn't pretend nothing had happened. For the first time in 12 years, I did absolutely nothing to maintain contact, and neither did he. Friday passed. Saturday passed. Sunday passed. Not one call. Not one text. Not one. Are you okay, Mom? Nothing. As if I truly didn't exist. As if my absence made no difference in their lives. But it was making a difference in mine. On Saturday, I got up early and cleaned the entire house. Not because it was dirty, but because I needed to move my body. I needed to do something with my hands while my head processed everything. I dusted every piece of furniture. I washed every dish. I swept every corner. And with every movement, I felt like something inside me was also being cleaned. On Sunday, I went to the farmer's market alone. I bought fresh flowers for the table. I bought fruit. I bought fresh baked bread. I bought all the things I liked, without thinking about what Mark liked or what Mason could eat if they came to visit, because they weren't coming, and I was starting to accept that. In the afternoon, I sat in the yard with a cup of tea. I hadn't done that in years. Just sit, without rushing, without guilt, without feeling like I should be doing something more useful. The birds were singing. The wind moved the leaves. The sun slowly hid behind the trees, and I was at peace. Well, not exactly at peace, but I was closer to it than I had been in a long time. On Monday morning, I made a decision. I opened the study closet, took out the box of documents, and put it on the dining room table. I opened it and took out all the papers again, all the receipts, all the transfers, all the proof that my son owed me over $200,000. I picked up my phone and looked through my contacts. There it was, Elizabeth Vance. I had met her years ago at a wedding. She was a lawyer, specialized in family and civil law. We had spoken a couple of times at social gatherings. She always struck me as a serious, direct woman, the kind who doesn't waste time. I sent her a text. Hi, Elizabeth. It's Caroline Harrison. I'm not sure if you remember me. We met at Brenda's daughter's wedding a few years ago. I need some legal advice. Do you have any time this week? I sent the message and left the phone on the table. I didn't expect an immediate reply, but 5 minutes later, the phone buzzed. Of course I remember you, Caroline. Does tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning work for you? Perfect. I'll be there. I'll send you my office address. And that's how Monday ended, with an appointment scheduled, with a decision made, with a new path that was scary but felt right. That night, I reviewed all the documents again. I organized them by date. I separated them by type: loans, transfers, gifts that should have been reimbursed, written promises, everything that could be useful. I put everything in a new folder I bought at the office supply store around the corner. A simple, professional, brown folder. I closed it and left it ready next to my purse. I went to bed earlier than usual, but again, I couldn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything, about how I'd gotten here, about how a mother reaches the point of suing her own son. But then I thought about Mark's words. You're not part of the family. And I knew I wasn't suing my son. I was getting my dignity back. Tuesday dawned gray. Low clouds threatened rain, but never quite decided to let it fall. I dressed with care: black pants, a beige blouse, a light jacket, nothing over the top, nothing dramatic, just presentable. I arrived at Elizabeth's office 15 minutes early. It was in a small, 3-story building downtown. I walked up the stairs slowly, clutching the folder to my chest. The reception area was simple. A desk. A young secretary who smiled when I walked in. Caroline Harrison. Yes, the attorney is expecting you. Second door on the left. I walked down the hall. The walls were covered in diplomas and certificates. I knocked on the door. Come in. I entered. Elizabeth was sitting behind a wooden desk. She had short, graying hair, neatly combed. She was wearing the glasses that hung from a gold chain. When she saw me, she stood up and extended her hand. Caroline, so good to see you. You too, Elizabeth. Thanks for seeing me. Please, sit. I sat down across from her. I placed the folder on my lap. Elizabeth settled into her chair and looked at me attentively. Tell me, what can I help you with? I took a deep breath. I didn't know where to start. So I started with the most recent thing. 4 days ago, my son told me I'm not part of his family. Elizabeth's expression didn't change. She just nodded. In what context? At a dinner, in front of his wife and my grandson. They all laughed. I see. And what happened next? I left. I haven't spoken to him since. Has he tried to contact you? No. Elizabeth picked up a pen and a notebook. Is this the first time something like this has happened? No. But it's the first time he's said it so clearly. What kind of relationship do you have? Complicated. I looked down. He's my only son. His father died 12 years ago. Since then, I've been alone. I've always supported him. I've always helped him. With everything. Does everything include money? Yes. How much money? I opened the folder and took out the sheet where I had done the math. I handed it to her. Elizabeth took it and read it in silence. Her eyes scanned every line, every amount, every date. When she finished, she looked up. $223,000. Yes. Do you have documents to support these amounts? All of them. I took out the rest of the papers and placed them on the desk. Receipts, transfers, signed contracts, written promises. Elizabeth began to review them one by one. She didn't say anything for several minutes. She just read, just analyzed. Finally, she put everything on the desk and took off her glasses. Caroline, what is it you want to do? That question caught me off guard. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because it was the first time anyone had asked me. I want him to pay me back what he owes me. Are you willing to go through a legal process? Yes. Even though he's your son? Precisely because he's my son. Elizabeth nodded slowly. I understand. This isn't going to be easy. Not emotionally. I know. He's going to be angry. His family is going to turn against you. They're going to say things. They're going to try to make you feel guilty. They already do. Elizabeth looked at me intently. Are you sure? Completely. She picked up her pen and started writing. Then, let's begin. First, I need you to formally authorize me to represent you. Then we'll prepare the lawsuit. With these documents, we have a solid case. How long will it take? It depends. But if everything is in order, we can have him served in less than a week. 1 week. 7 days for Mark to find out his mother was no longer the bank he always had available. Let's do it, I said. And that's how it all started. I left Elizabeth's office with a strange feeling in my chest. It wasn't relief. It wasn't fear. It was something in between. Something nameless. I walked slowly down the street, my purse hanging from my shoulder and the empty folder in my hand. All the documents had stayed with Elizabeth. Now they were evidence. Proof. Weapons. The sky was still gray. The clouds were still low. But it didn't rain. When I got home, it was noon. I made something to eat. A simple sandwich. Ham and cheese. I ate it standing by the kitchen window, looking at the yard. The flowers I bought on Sunday were still fresh in the vase. They still had color. They still had life. I washed the plate, dried my hands. I sat in the living room, and then the wait began. Elizabeth had told me the process would take a few days, that she needed to review everything carefully, prepare the legal documents, and draft the complaint correctly. This has to be impeccable, she'd said. We can't give him any room to defend himself by saying the loans were gifts. I had explained to her that some of them were gifts. The things for Mason, the Christmas presents, the meals, but the big loans, the $80,000 for the business, the $30,000 for the investments, the $15,000 from 3 months ago, all of those had documents. They had signatures. They had payment dates that were never met. That's enough, Elizabeth had said. We can proceed with this. So I waited. Tuesday passed. Wednesday passed. Thursday arrived with a shy sun that barely peeked through the clouds. And then, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Thursday, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I don't usually answer those calls, but something told me I should this time. Hello? Caroline Harrison? Yes, this is she. This is attorney Stephen Cole, from Cole and Partners. I'm calling on behalf of your son, Mark Harrison. My heart leaped, not from fear, from surprise. Mark already had a lawyer. That meant he already knew. He had already been served. Yes, I replied, as calmly as I could. Ma'am, my client has informed me that you are initiating legal proceedings against him for an alleged debt. I'd like to know if this is correct. It's not an alleged debt. It's a real debt. With documents. With signatures. The attorney cleared his throat. I understand. Look, Mrs. Harrison, I believe this can be resolved amicably. It's not necessary to resort to legal action. Your family. This can be settled by talking. I've already tried talking. For 12 years I've tried talking. Yes, but understand that these processes are long, expensive, and draining. And in the end, the only one who wins is the system. Wouldn't you prefer to reach an agreement? My attorney is handling this now. If your client wants to talk, he can talk to her. Ma'am, please, think about it. This could damage the family relationship irreparably. The relationship is already damaged, but it could get worse. I don't see how. There was a silence on the other end. Then the attorney sighed. I understand. Then I suppose we'll see you in court. I suppose so. He hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand. My fingers were trembling, not from fear, from adrenaline, from power. I had just hung up on a lawyer who was trying to intimidate me. I had just held my ground without wavering. I had just proven to myself that I could do this. 5 minutes later, the phone rang again. This time it was Mark. I knew because his name appeared on the screen. Mark. Just that. No hearts, no emojis, nothing to indicate he was my son. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times, 4. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. I listened to it an hour later. Mom, what the hell is going on? You're suing me? Seriously? This is how you resolve things now? Call me. We need to talk. This is insane. His voice sounded angry, indignant, as if I were the one who had done something wrong, as if I were the one acting irrationally. I deleted the message. I didn't call him back. Half an hour later, a text message came through. Mom, answer me. You can't do this. I'm your son. Then another. Call me. Please. Then another. Fine, I get it. You want attention. You have it. Happy? Now call me. I didn't answer any of them. I couldn't sleep that night. Not from guilt, not from fear, but from the sheer number of emotions coursing through my body at the same time. I was angry. I was sad. I was relieved. I was scared. I was strong. All at once. I got up at 1 o'clock in the morning and made myself some tea. I sat in the living room with the lights off, just the streetlight filtering through the window. I picked up my phone and reread Mark's messages. "I'm your son." Those 3 words hit me harder than anything else. Because that was the problem. It had always been the problem. He was my son. And I had let that justify everything. Let it erase everything. Let it make me accept the unacceptable time and time again. But being a son isn't a blank check. Being a son doesn't mean you can treat your mother poorly and expect her to always come back. Being a son doesn't mean you can take and take and take without ever giving anything in return. Being a son means responsibility. It means respect. It means reciprocity. And Mark hadn't fulfilled any of that. I turned off the phone and left it on the table. I finished my tea and went to bed. This time, I managed to sleep. On Friday morning, Elizabeth called me. "Caroline, it's all set. The lawsuit has been officially filed. Mark has 10 days to respond. If he doesn't respond, we proceed automatically. If he responds, we'll see him at the first hearing." And what will happen at that hearing? The judge will review the documents, he'll listen to both sides, and he'll decide whether or not the case proceeds. With the evidence you have, I'm almost certain it will proceed. And after that comes the recovery process. We can request a freeze on his accounts, a lien on his assets, his properties. It all depends on how he responds. A freeze, yes. If he doesn't pay voluntarily, the judge can order his bank accounts to be frozen until the debt is covered. I felt something in my stomach. It wasn't guilt. It was power. It was justice. It was the feeling that, finally, things were being balanced. "Okay," I said. "Let's move forward." "Perfect. I'll keep you updated on any news." We hung up. I sat on the sofa, staring at the phone in my hand. Everything was in motion. It was all happening. There was no turning back. That afternoon, I went for a walk. I needed air. I needed to move my body. I walked through the park near my house. There were children playing, couples sitting on benches, older men exercising. Life went on. The world kept moving, and so did I. I sat on a bench under a large tree. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The air smelled like freshly cut grass, like damp earth, like a beginning. I thought about my husband, about what he would say if he were here. He'd probably tell me I was doing the right thing, that Mark needs to learn, that love doesn't mean putting up with everything. Or maybe he'd tell me I was overreacting, that he's our son, that families don't sue each other. But he's not here, and I am. And this decision is mine. I opened my eyes and looked at the sky. The clouds had finally cleared. The sun was shining, clean, bright, direct. And for the first time in days, I smiled. It wasn't a big smile. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a smile of acceptance, of peace, of knowing I was doing the right thing, even if it hurt, even if it was hard, even if no one else understood it. I got up from the bench and walked back home. When I arrived, there was a car parked in front of my house. It was Mark's car. I stopped on the sidewalk. The car was there, parked right in front of my door, a gray sedan that I had helped pay for. $30,000, 3 years ago. "It's an investment in my business, Mom," he had told me then. "I need a car that projects a good image." The windows were tinted. I couldn't see if anyone was inside, but I knew he was there. I could feel it. I walked slowly toward my door. I took the keys out of my purse. My hands weren't shaking. I was calm. Calmer than I expected to be. When I reached the steps, the car door opened. Mark got out. He was 35 years old. But in that moment, he looked like a spoiled child who hadn't gotten what he wanted. He was wearing a wrinkled shirt, dark jeans, his hair unkempt. He looked tired. Dark circles under his eyes. Stressed. "Mom," he said, his voice tense. "We need to talk. We have nothing to talk about." "What do you mean, nothing? You're suing me." You think that's nothing? I walked up the steps without looking at him. I put the key in the lock. Mom, please, don't go inside yet. Give me 5 minutes. I already gave you 12 years. I opened the door and went inside. I tried to close it, but he put his foot in the frame. Mom, this is ridiculous. You can't sue me. I'm your son. Precisely because you're my son, you should have respected me. Respect? What are you talking about? I've always respected you. I looked him straight in the eye. A week ago, you told me I'm not part of your family. Everyone laughed. You did too. He looked down. For a second, he seemed ashamed. But only for a second. It was a joke, Mom. It was just a joke. We were kidding around, it wasn't a joke. And I wasn't kidding. Fine. I crossed a line. I'm sorry. There. Happy? I'm sorry. Now drop the lawsuit. No. What do you mean, no? You heard me. I'm not dropping the lawsuit. Mark took a step forward. I took a step back. Mom, do you understand what you're doing? You're going to ruin my life. The bank already froze my accounts. I can't make payroll. I can't pay my suppliers. My business is going to collapse. You should have thought of that before. Before what? Before making a joke? Are you really going to destroy my life over one stupid joke? It's not about the joke. It's about everything. Everything what? The $223,000 you owe me. Mark fell silent. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. That's not a debt. You gave me that money. You were my mom helping out her son. They were loans. With payment dates. With signatures. With promises. But you're my mom. Moms don't charge their kids. Moms don't deserve to be humiliated either. Mark ran his hands through his hair. He took a deep breath. When he spoke again, his voice was different, sober, more calculated. Mom, listen to me. I know I screwed up. I know I said something I shouldn't have. But this is too much. Think about Mason. He's your grandson. If my business fails, he's going to suffer. Is that what you want? Mason isn't my responsibility. He's yours. But you love him. I know you love him. Of course I love him. But that doesn't mean I have to sacrifice myself for him. It's not a sacrifice. It's family. Family doesn't work in only one direction, Mark. He closed his eyes, clenched his fists. When he opened them, his voice had changed again. Now it sounded desperate. Fine. Fine. I'll pay you. I swear I'll pay you. But give me time. Give me 6 months. A year. Whatever you need. But drop the lawsuit, please. I already gave you 12 years of time. But I didn't have the money to pay you. I was investing everything in the business. And I was investing everything in you. But you're my mom. That's what moms are supposed to do. That sentence hit me like a slap. Not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. With such conviction, with such certainty, that I owed him everything just for bringing him into the world. Moms are people too, Mark. They get tired too. They need respect too. And this is respect? Suing me? Freezing my accounts? Ruining my business? You ruined my peace of mind. I'm just taking back what's mine. Mark let out a bitter laugh. I can't believe you're doing this. My own mother. I can't believe you treated me like that. My own son. We stared at each other. Two people who no longer recognized one another. Two strangers who were once each other's entire world. Finally, Mark took a step back. You know what, Mom? Do whatever you want. But I'm warning you. If you go through with this, you'll never see Mason again. Ever. I swear it. I felt a lump in my throat. But I didn't back down. That's your decision. Not mine. It's your decision. You're choosing money over your family. You chose money over your mother a long time ago. Mark shook his head. He looked at me with contempt. With rage. With something I had never seen in his eyes before. This isn't over, he said. I promise you that. He turned around and walked to his car. He yanked the door open. Got in. Started the engine. And sped off. I stood in the doorway of my house, watching the car disappear down the street. I closed the door slowly. Locked it. I walked to the living room and sank onto the sofa. That's when I realized I was trembling, not from fear, from rage. from sadness, from relief. All at once, I closed my eyes and let the tears come. I cried silently. I cried for what could have been and never was. I cried for the broken promises. I cried for the lost years. I cried for the mother I tried to be, who was never enough. But I also cried with relief, because I had finally said everything I needed to say. I had finally stood firm. I had finally chosen my dignity over his comfort. The phone rang. It was Megan. I didn't answer. It rang again. Her again. I didn't answer. A text message came through. "Caroline, you have to stop this. You're being selfish. Think about your grandson." I blocked the number. Another message arrived, this time from an unknown number. "Mrs. Harrison, this is Megan's mother. I don't know what's going on between you, but what you're doing isn't right. Children make mistakes. Mothers forgive. That's how it works." I blocked that number too. I got up from the sofa and went to the kitchen. I made coffee, sat at the table. I picked up my phone and called Elizabeth. "Caroline, are you okay?" "Yes." "Mark came to my house." "What happened?" "He tried to get me to drop the lawsuit." I told him no. "How did he react?" "He threatened me. He said if I continue with this, I'll never see my grandson again." Elizabeth sighed. "It's a common tactic. They want to scare you. They want to make you feel guilty. And it's working." "That's up to you." I stayed silent. I took a sip of coffee. It was hot, bitter, real. "I'm not backing down," I said finally. "I'm glad to hear that, because this is just beginning. I know. They're going to keep pushing. They're going to try to make you feel bad. They're going to find allies. They're going to invent stories. Let them." "Are you sure?" "Completely. Then we move forward." We move forward. I hung up. I finished my coffee, washed the mug, dried my hands, and I smiled. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't running away. I wasn't giving in. I wasn't letting myself be walked all over. I was fighting. And even though it hurt, even though it was scary, even if it cost me everything, I knew I was doing the right thing. The following days were a silent battle. There were no shouts, no blows, but there was war. A war made of ignored messages, unanswered calls, and stares from the neighbors who were already starting to talk. On Saturday morning, Elizabeth called me with news. "Caroline, Mark's lawyer filed a response. He's alleging that the loans were actually gifts. He says there's no legal obligation to repay money a mother gives her son voluntarily. But there are documents. There are signatures." "I know. And that's what we're going to use. We have the first hearing on Monday. I need you to come prepared. Bring everything you have. Original receipts, emails, text messages where he promised to pay you. Everything. I have everything. Perfect. I'll see you Monday at 9 o'clock in the morning at the courthouse. I'll send you the address." I spent the weekend organizing everything. I took the box out of the study again. I reviewed every paper, every receipt, every bank transfer. I searched my email for all the messages where Mark asked me for money. I found dozens. "Mom, I need $5,000 for an emergency. I'll pay you back in 2 months. Mom, the bank is pressuring me. Can you lend me $10,000? I'll pay you back with interest. Mom, just this one last time. I swear it's the last time." I printed everything, organized it by date, put it in a new folder. On Sunday, I went to bed early. I wanted to be rested. I wanted to be clear-headed. I wanted to be strong, but I couldn't sleep. I lay awake thinking about everything, about how I'd gotten here, about whether I was doing the right thing, about whether my husband would be proud of me or disappointed. At 4 o'clock in the morning, I got up, made tea. I sat in the living room with a blanket over my legs. I looked out the window. The street was empty. The lights were off. Everyone was asleep but me. I thought about Mason, my 8-year-old grandson, his curious eyes, his easy laugh, how he used to hug me when he was smaller, how he barely looks at me now. Mark had threatened to keep him from me, and he would probably follow through on that threat, but I couldn't give in. Because if I gave in now, what was I teaching Mason? That it's okay to take advantage of people? That mothers don't deserve respect? That love is something you can exploit without consequences? No, I wasn't going to teach him that. Even if it cost me his presence, I wasn't going to teach him that. Monday dawned cold. I dressed with care. Black pants, a white blouse, a gray jacket, nothing over the top. Nothing dramatic, just dignified. I got to the courthouse at 8:30. Elizabeth was already there, waiting for me at the entrance. She was carrying a leather briefcase, her glasses hanging from the gold chain. "Ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be. That's enough." We went inside together. The courthouse was an old building with long hallways and tiled floors. It smelled like old paper and cheap coffee. There were people waiting on wooden benches. Some spoke in low voices, others just stared at the floor. We sat on a bench near the hearing room. Elizabeth reviewed the documents one last time. "Remember," she told me, "be clear, be direct, don't get emotional. Just answer what they ask you, nothing more." "Understood." At 9 o'clock sharp, the courtroom door opened. A clerk came out with a clipboard. "Case of Harrison versus Harrison." I stood up. My legs were shaking a little. Elizabeth took my arm. "It's okay. You've got this." We went in. The courtroom was small. There was a large desk at the front, where the judge Saturday, an older man with thick glasses and a serious expression. On one side were the benches for the lawyers and the parties, and on the other side was Mark. I saw him and felt something in my chest. I don't know if it was pain or anger or sadness, maybe all of it together. He was sitting next to his lawyer, Mr. Stephen Cole, a young man in a dark suit and a red tie. Mark looked at me when I entered. I didn't look away. We looked at each other for 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. Then I sat down next to Elizabeth. The judge spoke first. "Good morning. We are here to review the complaint filed by Mrs. Caroline Harrison against Mr. Mark Harrison for non-payment of debt." "Is the plaintiff ready?" Elizabeth stood up. "Yes, Your Honor." "Is the defendant ready?" Mr. Cole stood up. "Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff may proceed." Elizabeth took out the documents. She placed them on the table. She began to speak in a clear, firm voice. "Your Honor, my client is suing her son for the repayment of $223,000 loaned over the course of 12 years. We have documentary evidence of every one of these transactions. Signed contracts, bank transfers, emails where the defendant promised to repay the money. It is all documented." The judge took the papers and began to review them. Several minutes passed. No one spoke. The only sound was the rustling of pages. Finally, the judge looked up. "Does the defendant have anything to say?" Mr. Cole stood up. "Yes, Your Honor. We allege that these were not loans, but gifts. Mrs. Harrison gave her son money voluntarily. There was no legal obligation for repayment. It is common practice among family members." The judge looked at Mark. "Mr. Harrison." Mark stood up. He swallowed. "Yes, Your Honor. My mom always helped me out, but it was never on the condition that I pay her back. She did it because she wanted to, because she was my mom." The judge looked back at the documents. He pulled out one in particular. He read it aloud. "There is a contract here signed by both parties. Date, March 15th, 2020. Amount, $80,000. Purpose, loan for business startup. Payment term, 24 months. Lender's signature, Caroline Harrison. Borrower's signature, Mark Harrison." The judge looked up. "This does not look like a gift." Mr. Cole cleared his throat. "Your Honor, my client signs what his mother asks him to sign, but that doesn't mean there was a real intent to collect. And why would Mrs. Harrison sign such a document if she had no intention of collecting?" Silence. The judge went back to the papers. Then he looked at Elizabeth. "Do you have anything else to add?" Elizabeth stood up. "Yes, Your Honor. In addition to the formal documents, we have text messages where Mr. Harrison explicitly promises to repay the money, emails where he asks for loans, not gifts, and testimony that Mrs. Harrison took out a second mortgage on her home to give him that money. This was not a gift. It was a sacrifice that the defendant has never honored." The judge nodded slowly. "I see." He looked at Mark. "Mr. Harrison, do you have the means to pay this debt?" Mark turned pale. "No, Your Honor. Not at this time. How much can you pay monthly? I don't know. My business is struggling. Do you have assets? Mr. Cole chimed in. Your Honor, my client has a house and 2 vehicles. But everything is in his wife's name. The judge raised an eyebrow. In his wife's name? Yes, Your Honor. And when were these property transfers made? The lawyer hesitated. Recently. How recently? Last week. The judge closed his eyes, shook his head. Mr. Harrison, you transferred all your assets to your wife's name after you found out your mother was going to sue you. Mark didn't answer. Answer the question. Yes, Your Honor. The judge banged a pen on the desk. That's called fraudulent concealment of assets. It's illegal, and I don't like it one bit. Mr. Cole tried to speak. Your Honor, it was just a preventative measure. A preventative measure to evade your responsibilities. The judge cut him off. I don't like this. I don't like it at all. He looked at Elizabeth. Does the plaintiff request a pre-judgment attachment? Elizabeth nodded. Yes, Your Honor. We request an immediate freeze on his bank accounts and a lien on the transferred assets. The judge wrote something down. Granted. I am ordering an immediate freeze on all of Mr. Mark Harrison's bank accounts, and I am opening an investigation into the property transfers to determine if they were made in bad faith. Mark jumped to his feet. But that will ruin my business. The judge looked at him coldly. Mr. Harrison, you owe your mother $223,000. You have signed documents. You have broken promises. And on top of that, you tried to hide your assets. You are in no position to protest. But she's my mom. Families don't sue each other. Families don't take advantage of each other, either. The judge struck his desk with the gavel. The lawsuit proceeds. Next hearing in 30 days. At that time, we will determine a payment plan. This session is adjourned. It was over. We left the courtroom in silence. Mark stayed inside with his lawyer. I didn't turn to look at him. I didn't want to see his face. I didn't want to see his anger or his fear or whatever he was feeling. Elizabeth took my arm when we reached the hallway. You did very well. I didn't say anything. Exactly. You let the documents speak for you. We walked out of the courthouse. The sun was shining outside. It was hot. The city was moving. Life was going on. I stopped on the sidewalk and took a deep breath. What's next? I asked Elizabeth. Now we wait. His accounts are frozen. He can't move money. He can't sell anything. He has 30 days to present a payment plan. If he doesn't, we proceed with a full seizure of assets. And if he presents a plan, then the judge decides if it's fair or not, and you decide if you accept it. I nodded slowly. Thank you, Elizabeth. Don't thank me yet. This is just beginning. But I knew it wasn't. This was already over. At least the hardest part. Because I had already won. I hadn't won money. Not yet. But I had won something more important. I had won my dignity. The news of the asset freeze spread fast. Faster than I expected. By Tuesday afternoon, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Unknown numbers. Messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Mark's acquaintances. Megan's friends. Even Mason's teacher's mother wrote to me. They all said the same thing in different words. That I was overreacting. That mothers don't do that. That I was destroying my own family. That I should be ashamed. That money isn't worth more than blood. That God was going to punish me for this. I blocked all the numbers. I turned off my notifications. I left the phone on silent on the kitchen table and made myself some tea. I sat by the window and looked at the yard. The flowers were still there. The leaves moved in the wind. The world kept spinning, even though everyone wanted to make me feel like I was the one who was wrong. On Wednesday morning, when I went out to buy bread, Mrs. Gable from down the street stopped me. She's 65 and has lived in this neighborhood for 30 years. She's always been kind to me, always says hello, always asks how I am. But that day, her look was different. She stopped me with a hand on my arm and spoke to me in that voice people use when they think they're giving you advice but are really judging you. She told me she'd heard what was happening with Mark, that she knew sons can be difficult sometimes, but that's just how sons are, that she had been through similar things with her oldest son, that at the end of the day, family is all that matters. That money comes and goes, but you can't change your blood, that I should think about it carefully, because a mother suing her son is something people don't forget, that the neighborhood was already talking, that my reputation was at stake. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, I thanked her for her concern and continued on my way. I didn't try to explain. I didn't try to defend myself, because I knew she wouldn't understand. People who have never had to choose between their dignity and their children's love will never understand. That afternoon, as I was putting the bread away in the kitchen, someone knocked on the door. It wasn't a normal knock. It was a loud, insistent, desperate pounding. I looked through the peephole before opening. It was Megan. She was holding Mason's hand. The boy's eyes were red as if he'd been crying. I opened the door, but I didn't let them in. Megan looked different. Her hair was a mess. No makeup. Her eyes were swollen. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She looked at me with a mix of rage and desperation and told me we had to talk, that this couldn't go on, that Mark was a wreck, that the business was collapsing, that the employees hadn't been paid, that the suppliers were threatening to sue, that everything they had built was falling apart because of me. She asked if this was what I wanted, if I wanted to see my son ruined, if I wanted Mason to grow up watching his grandmother destroy his father. I looked at her in silence. Then I looked at Mason. The boy wouldn't look me in the eye. He just stared at his shoes. I asked Megan if she had ever thought about how I felt when they all laughed at me at that dinner. If she ever wondered what it feels like to be told by your own family that you're not part of it. If she ever considered that maybe I deserved respect too. Megan didn't answer. She just squeezed Mason's hand and told me I was a bitter old woman who didn't understand how the modern world works. That in real families, people support each other without expecting anything in return. That what I was doing wasn't justice, it was revenge. That God would make me pay for this one day. I told her that God had already made me pay enough with 12 years of being invisible. I closed the door slowly. I heard Megan scream something from outside, but I couldn't understand what. Then I heard footsteps walking away. A car starting. Silence again. I stood behind the door for several minutes. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from rage, from sadness, from everything. I walked to the living room and sat down. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The phone buzzed on the table. It was a message from a number I didn't have saved. It said that if I didn't drop the lawsuit, I would regret it. That they had ways of making me understand. That this was my last chance. I read it twice. Then I took a screenshot and sent it to Elizabeth. She replied immediately, telling me that was intimidation and that we could file an additional complaint. I told her I didn't want any more trouble. I just wanted this to be over. On Thursday night, I was watching television when I heard a noise outside. A sharp scrape against metal. I looked out the window and saw that someone had spray painted my car. In black paint, a single word: traitor. I went outside. I looked at the car. I looked around. No one was there. The lights in the neighboring houses were off. Everyone was asleep. I went back inside. Locked the door. I called Elizabeth again. This time she told me we couldn't ignore this anymore, that we had to report it, that this was escalating. I told her okay, to do whatever she had to do. On Friday, I went to the police station. I filed a report. I showed them the pictures of the car. I showed them the threatening messages. The officer who took my report was a young man with a bored expression. He took notes of everything without much interest. He told me it was probably just kids messing around, that you can't trust anyone these days, that I should be careful, that I should install cameras at my house. Nothing more. He didn't make me feel safe. He didn't make me feel protected. He just made me feel more alone. I returned home as it was getting dark. The streets were empty. The wind blew dry leaves across the sidewalk. I went inside and locked the door. I checked all the windows, all the doors. Everything was locked. But I didn't feel safe. I felt besieged. I felt attacked. I felt tired. I sat in the living room with the lights off. Only the street light came through the curtains. I thought about everything that had happened in the last 2 weeks. About how I had gone from being an invisible mother to a public enemy. About how I had gone from not existing to them to being the only thing they thought about. About how money had changed everything. Or maybe it hadn't changed anything. Maybe it had just revealed what was always there. The phone buzzed. It was Elizabeth. She was texting to tell me that Mark had submitted a counteroffer. He was offering to pay $50,000 over 5 years. $10,000 per year. She asked if I wanted to consider it. I did the math in my head. 50,000 out of 223,000. Less than a quarter. And in 5 years. When I'd be 65. If I even lived that long. If he even paid. If everything went well. I replied to Elizabeth. No. That it wasn't acceptable. That either he paid it all, or we'd see each other at the final hearing. She told me that was fine. That it was my decision. That she supported me. That we'd see each other at the next hearing. I slept better that night than I had in days. Not because I was calm, but because I was certain. Certain that I was doing the right thing. Certain that I wouldn't give in. Certain that this would end as it was supposed to end. 3 more weeks passed before the next hearing. 3 weeks in which the world seemed to stop and speed up at the same time. 3 weeks in which I learned that loneliness can be both a punishment and a gift. I stopped going out as much. I stopped answering calls. I stopped explaining myself. I simply existed in my own bubble, waiting for the legal process to run its course. Elizabeth called me every couple of days to keep me informed. She told me Mark's lawyer was still trying to negotiate. They had raised the offer to $70,000 over 3 years, then to $90,000 over 2 years. Every time she called with a new proposal, my answer was the same. Not until it was a reasonable amount and a reasonable time frame. Not until there was a real acknowledgement of the full debt. The morning of the final hearing, I got up before dawn. I made coffee. I sat in the kitchen and watched the sky turn from black to gray to pink. There was something symbolic about that sunrise. As if the universe were telling me that after the darkness, there is always light. I dressed in the same gray jacket and white blouse I had worn to the first hearing. I combed my hair carefully. I put on the pearl earrings my husband gave me for our 20th anniversary. I looked in the mirror and saw a different woman than the one I had been a month ago. I saw someone who had learned to say no. Someone who had learned that self-love is not selfishness. I arrived at the courthouse half an hour early. Elizabeth was already there with her leather briefcase and her serene expression that calmed me just by seeing it. She told me there was news. That early this morning, Mark's lawyer had called with a final offer. $140,000, paid over 18 months. It was more than half the debt. It was a reasonable time frame. It was something that could technically be considered a fair agreement. I stayed silent, thinking. Elizabeth explained that if I accepted this offer, everything would end today. The judge would ratify the agreement. Mark would have to comply or face criminal consequences. I would receive that money and could close this chapter of my life. But she also told me something else. She said that if I didn't think it was enough, we could keep going. That she believed we could win the full case. That the documents were solid. That the judge was clearly on our side. I asked her what she would do in my place. Elizabeth took off her glasses and looked me straight in the eye. She said that wasn't a legal question, but an emotional one. That technically, $140,000 was a victory. That I would recover more than half of what I had lost, but that she also understood if I wanted to fight for the whole thing. That it was my decision, and whatever I chose, she would support me. I thought about the last 12 years, about everything I had given, about everything I had sacrificed, about all the times I said yes when I should have said no. I thought about my husband, about what he would have wanted from me. I thought about Mason, about how this fight was affecting him, even though it wasn't his fault. I thought about Mark, about the boy he was and the man he had become. And finally, I thought about myself, about the 60-year-old woman who deserved peace more than revenge, who deserved to sleep soundly more than to be absolutely right. I told Elizabeth I accepted the offer. That $140,000 over 18 months was enough. Not because I didn't deserve more, but because I deserved to be done with this. She nodded and went to speak with Mark's lawyer. When we entered the courtroom, Mark was already there. He looked different, thinner, paler, more tired. He didn't look at me when I came in. He kept his eyes on his hands. The judge arrived punctually and asked us to rise. Elizabeth explained that the parties had reached an agreement. The judge reviewed the documents Mark's lawyer had submitted. He read the terms aloud. $140,000, paid in 18 monthly installments of $7,777. The first payment was due in 30 days. If any payment was missed, the full seizure of assets would be activated automatically. The judge asked if both parties were in agreement. Elizabeth said yes. Mark's lawyer said yes. The judge asked us to sign. Elizabeth signed first, then me, then Mark's lawyer. Finally, Mark. The judge struck his desk with the gavel and declared the case closed with a binding agreement. He said he hoped both parties would comply with what was agreed upon and that the family could heal. Everyone stood up. Everyone gathered their things. Mark approached me before I could leave. He stood in front of me, his hands in his pockets, his head slightly bowed. He told me he wanted me to know something, that he never thought we would get to this point, that he never believed I would actually do it, that he always assumed that, in the end, I would give in, just as I had always given in. He told me he had learned something in these weeks, that he understood he had taken me for granted, that he had assumed my love was unconditional, and therefore he could do whatever he wanted without consequences. He said he wasn't sure if he could ever forgive me for this, but that he understood why I had done it. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, I told him that I wasn't sure I could ever forgive him either, but that I wasn't looking for his forgiveness, that what I was looking for was my dignity, and that wasn't something he could give me or take away from me, that it was something I had reclaimed for myself. I told him I expected him to make the payments, that if he did, maybe one day we could talk again, maybe one day we could rebuild something, but that was up to him. The ball was in his court. Mark nodded slowly. He asked if he could hug his mom one last time. I told him he could hug me, but that it wasn't the last time, that it was simply a different kind of hug. The hug of two people who had fought and who now had to learn to coexist with that history. We hugged briefly. It was awkward. It was sad, but it was honest. When we separated, Mark left with his lawyer without looking back. Elizabeth and I left the courthouse together. The sun was shining outside with an intensity that made me close my eyes for a second. When I opened them, everything seemed clearer, sharper, more real. Elizabeth asked me how I felt. I told her I felt many things at the same time. Relief, sadness, pride, fear, hope, all mixed into an emotion that had no name, but that felt like freedom. 6 months passed. Mark made the first 6 payments. On the first of every month, without fail, the transfer arrived in my account. $7,777. He didn't call, he didn't write, he just paid. And that was enough. I didn't reach out to him either. I needed time. We both needed time. One day, I received a text message from an unknown number. It was Mason. He said he found my number in his dad's phone. He wanted to know if he could visit me sometime, that he missed me, that he had heard grown-up things he didn't really understand, but he knew there had been problems, that he just wanted to see his grandma. I replied that, of course, he could visit me, that the doors to my house would always be open for him, that I loved him, that nothing that had happened between his dad and me changed that. 2 weeks later, Mark called me. He asked if it was true that Mason had texted me. I said yes. He asked if I was really okay with him coming over. I told him it was more than okay, that Mason wasn't to blame for any of it, and I wasn't going to punish him for the adult's mistakes. Mark was silent for a moment. Then he told me he would bring him over the following Sunday, that they could spend the afternoon together, that he would come back to pick him up later. That Sunday, I made Mason's favorite lunch, pasta and meatballs. I cleaned the house. I put fresh flowers on the table. When they arrived, Mark stayed in the car. Mason ran out and hugged me with that strength only kids have. He told me he had missed me so much. I told him I had missed him too. We spent the afternoon playing, talking, laughing, like before, like it always should have been. When Mark came to pick him up, he walked up to the door. He said, "Thank you." I told him he didn't have to thank me, that Mason was my grandson and would always be welcome. Mark nodded. We said goodbye with a polite wave. Still distant. Still awkward, but less hostile than before. Today, when I sit in my yard with a cup of tea and look at the flowers I planted a few months ago, I think about everything that happened. I think about the woman I was a year ago, about how I allowed myself to be treated, about how I confused love with sacrifice, and I realized something important. I didn't lose my family when I set boundaries. I regained my dignity. And maybe, just maybe, by doing that, I also gave them the chance to learn something they never would have learned otherwise. That true love isn't unconditional. That respect is the foundation of every relationship. That mothers are also people with limits and needs. And that it is never, ever too late to choose yourself. If you are reading this and you identify with my story, I want you to know something. You are not selfish for setting boundaries. You are not a bad mother for demanding respect. You are not a traitor for defending yourself. You are simply human, and you deserve dignity just as much as anyone else. Sometimes, the bravest love we can give is self-love.